Hey guys, welcome back to 10 a day. So today we're going to be covering thrusts, right? So we're going to cover our number 1 thrust, our number 2 thrust, and our number 3 thrust, all right? Now these are arcing thrusts, right? So it's not just a straight thrust. I'm not extending out and pulling back. I'm arcing through each one of these. So I'm reaching out, but I'm keeping a relative flex in my wrist and not fully extending it, right? So I'm moving with it as they come, and if I miss, I go through. If I stick it, well, I stuck it and I'm gonna have to pull it out. All right, so let's go ahead and let's talk about it and let's cover our angle 1 thrust, or our number 1 thrust. So we're gonna start off by pulling it back. We're going to be going upwards and over our our opposite side shoulder, excuse me, as we do this. And now we have the option of lots of different footwork patterns, but for now we're just gonna stand with our dominant leg in front. We're going to turn our hip behind our thrust. We're going to reach out in front of us as we extend that hip, and then we're going to bring it right over the shoulder. And we're just going to come back, thrusting just like this. Now, I don't want you to stay in super close, right? We're not going to thrust like this. While you can, and if somebody's this close, you know, it's a possibility. We are going to still reach out a good bit, but I just don't want you to fully cast out, right? Now, there's times where we will fully cast out. It's just not for this specific technique, right? So we're gonna keep a relative bend in our wrist, but we're still reaching out and then arcing it all the way back. All right, so let's go ahead and let's practice this for 1 minute. Ready? Begin. Thrust. Thrust. Bring it back. One hand is at the chest, and it's gonna come back, right? You can imagine you're reaching for another weapon. That's our counterbalance hand as we're doing this. So one's up here and here. Extend. Reach out as you do this. And back. Thrust out and back. Turn your hip as you do each one of these. All right. Hips are always moving in all of our techniques. We want to be using our hips because that's where the power comes from. So keep that in mind, always using the hips. And now I'm pulling it all the way back. You can see I'm pretty clear right here in the front as I do this. This is a good habit to have for, especially if you start doing double stick stuff, right? You're gonna have one, that's time. Go ahead and switch. Ready, begin. So, especially on that left side, pulling that back is a good habit to have whenever you're doing double stick stuff, because it's going to get out of your way and allow you to use one hand more, and then the other hand is usually using thrusts whenever we're doing double sticks anyways. All right, now on this you can start with your right leg in front if you're dominant, right leg dominant, or if you want to just practice both sides the exact same way, you can put that left foot in front when you're using that left hand. Same things though, I still want you reaching out as you do this. Now, whenever we do this thrust like this, if we were actually making contact with somebody with a sword, this sort of a thrust is going to be a lot more devastating than a straight thrust in and out, because this goes up under the ribs and through all the internals. If you actually hit somebody with this, they're going to die, right? So don't actually do this unless you're in warfare for whatever reason. Don't actually go around thrusting somebody. I don't feel like I should have to say that, but time. But I feel like I have to say that sometimes. All right, so now we're gonna do what's typically referred to as a reverse arc. All right, so let's imagine we just did our first one and now we flipped over. So we're on this side, we're on our opposite side of our body. The tip is pointed towards the front. We're going to extend out and then curve it back. All right, so from this side, extend out and curve it back. Now, a lot of these will happen as you're moving around your opponent. So say I have my opponent who is right here, I would thrust as I'm moving past them that way. All right, so it's not really gonna be one where I'm standing in front of them and doing this. While I can do that, it's usually a offset. I'm moving that way and I'm thrusting back the other direction. So just kind of keep that in mind. We're gonna train with it as if they're kind of right in front of us, but that's more of the realistic implementation. All right, ready, 1 minute, begin. Here, boom. Now you can go above the shoulder. A lot of times we'll chamber this down back at the hip as we're doing it. So think like I just threw it number 1 and then I can come back with that second one. All right, thrust this out. reach out as you're doing this. Still not fully extending the wrist though, we're not casting yet. And then arc it, all right? Extend out and arc it back. It should go right back into that number 1 chamber. So if you wanted to practice, you could go 1, 2, 1, 2, all right? So you can do your angle 1 and then throw that second thrust if you'd like. If you're not quite comfortable with that, just practice this motion right here. I'm still pressing off this back leg as I go for it. Another option for doing this same movement is moving forward. I've seen this before quite a few times too, this assisted thrust, right? For going in a little bit deeper. There's lots of ways that we can do this. I'm gonna show you basically the generic ways, and then I want you to play around with it. All right, go ahead and switch sides. Ready? Other side, begin. Thrust it out. Thrust it out, all right? Still practicing the good body mechanics, pressing off of that back leg as we do this. Extend out and then curve. I want that extension without the wrist extension. Wrist stays flexed, but arm extends and then come out. All right, don't just do this in close. Again, this is still a viable option. I can do this in close depending on where my opponent is. But for now, I want you extending that arm out and then bringing it back. Extend the arm out and bring it back. You see, I'm able to go all the way out and then I come in, but I'm not fully extending that wrist. Keep this going. And that's time. All right, so our next one is going to be our angle 3 thrust, right? So our angle 3 thrust is this high line thrust that's going around, right? So I'm going out, out, and around. So this one can be, if your opponent's here, I like to use this one as I step off line, right? I've done this one a few times in sparring actually, where I move off line and do it, but it can also just be straight in front of you. The same things apply though. I'm not going to point my wrist all the way out. I'm going to keep it relatively bent, and then I'm doing a bicep stop here as it goes and stops on the same side shoulder, just like this. All right, make sure you're still reaching all the way out without the wrist going all the way out. And 1 minute, begin. Now raise up, and now we can hook it a little bit wider, but remember, if we hook it wider, it's easier to see. So we'll go more forward first and then hook. It's gonna be a little bit harder to see because our eyes typically see things more with our peripherals. It's easier to register it versus something that's going straight forward, right? That's where we hit them, and then it curves past. Boom. Keep this going. Now I'm still turning my hip, just like if I was doing a lead hook. Same mechanics, right? Raise up, forward and around, forward and around. If you want to practice this with a side step, you can do that, right? That's fine. I have nothing wrong with that. That's where I would probably be using this, and that's where I typically do use this thrust. This thrust can also be a little bit more angled downwards, right? So think going behind that clavicle and going down. All right, ready? Switch sides. And begin, other side, all right? So it can go slightly downwards behind that clavicle. It can go on the neck. We can drop it down a little bit, and it can go on the rib. It's more of these horizontal strikes, but sometimes it will be a slight downward angle as well. That's more up to you. So here, easier to see, right? Versus here. So let's keep that in a little bit tighter as we do this. Raise up and thrust. Raise up and thrust. Up, thrust. Turn each time. Turn those hips. Turn those hips. All right, easier to see, but probably easier to practice. Keep it in tight. Shoot it out forward first, and then curve it. And that's time. All right, so we're gonna do a quick drill to put it all together. So on this next one, we're only gonna do it for 30 seconds, but we're gonna do 1, 2, and 3. We're gonna start with our lead leg. We're going to angle 1, bring it down to the hip, angle 2 thrust, flip it over, angle 3 thrust. Bring it back down to that hip, and we're gonna reset. 30 seconds, dominant side, begin. 1, 2, 3. And right now I'm slowing this down, but as we do this, or as you feel more comfortable, you actually would be adding slashes, more like redondos, in between each one of those. See, here's my backhand redondo, boom. Here's my forehand redondo, and then here's angle 2 slash. All right, so a little bit more advanced, but if you want to practice that, you can. I don't have any problem with that. Angle 1 thrust, bring it back down to the hip, angle 2, and that's time. Other side. Ready? 30 seconds, begin. Angle 1 thrust, bring it down to that opposite hip, angle 2 thrust, flip it over, angle 3 thrust, and back. 1, 2, 3, and back. 1, 2, and 3, and back. 1, 2, 3, and back. And that's time. All right, guys, so if you do want to add in those redondos and those slashes in between, feel free to do that. There's also a footwork pattern that goes along with this. We didn't get that today. I just want you to understand the mechanics of being able to do these thrusts, and then I want you to play around with how you can do them. Remember, there's different ways to do everything. Learn that. I'm teaching you the basics. I want you to dig in a little bit deeper, and if you have any questions on this, ask me. Maybe somebody else will comment down below, or I'll do it myself. All right. Hopefully I will see you guys tomorrow, and if you like this, like, subscribe, do all that stuff, yada yada, and see you tomorrow. Not hopefully, you're gonna be back tomorrow.